Hi everyone, today we're going to learn how to set up your study environment and prepare you mentally so you can be successful and not be overwhelmed with the learning. This tutorial is a part of Learn Everything About JavaScript in one course. The link to the full course is in the description below. The first mental note that you should know is getting things done without knowing everything. Well, human language about computer is estimated around 30 years. That's very long. And don't try to learn everything. Instead, try to know enough to accomplish your task. Well, you may ask how much is enough. Well, if you don't need to improve the process and you only need to consume the process, in that case, knowing the input and the corresponding output is enough. So we have learned that this is programming. We're gonna have input and we process the input and we output some useful information. Well, a program is gonna be very big and it's gonna be a multiple blocks of something like this connected to each other. So if you don't have to modify the process here, you can treat it as a black box. And the other thing that you need to know is the output for the corresponding input. So I'm gonna give you a really simple example. I'm gonna have an input as a string, it's called hello world, and my process is gonna be this function right here, console.log. This function gonna take in hello world as an input, and it's gonna output that same string on the console. Now we don't need to know what's inside console log. All we need to know in this case is console.log gonna print out its input on the console. And this is how it looks like. You can see here, whatever we put it in here, it should print it out. I can try another one, hello world 2. And that's it. It's a very simple concept. And remember, if we're just using this function, we don't even need to know what's inside the function. We only need to know what's the input look like and what's the output gonna be. Now, the second mental note that you need to know is if your work requires you to modify the black box, which is the process, then you need to deep dive into black box and see what it is because it's gonna benefit your work. Let's go back to the previous example about a sorted path. If your task is to improve the sorted path function, the process, this is when you need to look inside the black box and understand what we have in there in order to modify it. So there we go. The two mental notes. One, treating the process as a black box if you only need to consume it. And two, if your task is to modify the process, you need to deep dive into the black box and see what's inside of it. Now you have mentally prepared. We're gonna dive into the first preparation to code, which is the terminal, the gateway to command your computer. So terminal is the first program that people ever built to communicate with a computer. Every computer in the world, no matter what operating system it is, it always has a terminal. So on Mac OS, you go to application and terminal to open the terminal, or you can go to Spotlight and type in terminal and then hit enter. Now we are at the terminal. This is how it looks like. Especially Ubuntu, you can go to super and then terminal. On Windows 10, the terminal is known as command prompt. You can open it by start, Windows system, and command prompt. And this is how you're gonna run your code with terminal. Right here on my right, I have my code. This function is gonna print out hello world in the console. This is the console. And to run my code, I'm gonna call my Node.js binary. And I'm gonna pass in my program file. And hit enter. And that's how we run a JavaScript program. To briefly explain to you why we need terminal and why we need Node.js binary, this is how it's gonna work. First, you have your program, and then your terminal will take your Node.js binary and also your program and pass it out to the operating system. The operating system gonna pass it out to the hardware. The hardware actually run your code and then return the result to the terminal, which is the console. If this sounds complicated to you, because it is, but don't worry, as we said before, only need to know enough to do your work. Knowing how to run your code at this point is good enough. Now we're gonna install Node.js in your system. Node.js is gonna read your JavaScript code and tell the computer what to do. To download it, we're gonna head to Node.js official download page. And then you can choose your system installer. I have Mac OS, I'm gonna choose this. Then you only need to follow the installation instruction. After installation, we're gonna head to the terminal and verify that Node.js is installed correctly. I have Node.js 12 installed and npm version 6 installed. npm is Node.js package manager. We can use npm to install different Node.js modules, and we're gonna learn how to do it later. After installing Node.js, we're gonna install nodemon. Nodemon watches and reruns your code with Node whenever there is any changes. It's very handy, and it's highly suggested that you install this too. So you're gonna copy this command, go to your terminal, paste it in, and hit enter. It's gonna ask for your password. It's highly recommended that you use Mac OS or Linux like Ubuntu to follow this course. Okay, now I have nodemon installed. I can verify it by looking at the current version of nodemon installed. Next step, we're gonna install VScode. VScode is a powerful editor that developed by Microsoft. This is VScode. I've been using it since the beginning of the class. We're gonna head into the VScode website and download installation. VScode is available for Windows, Debian, and Mac OS. Go ahead and download your installation. Once finished downloading, you can open VScode and it should open a welcome page just like this. Now there's a feature in VScode I highly suggest to turn on, which is the autosave. You're gonna go to File and hit autosave. It's gonna automatically save your file after 1 second. You will never lose your code. And combined with nodemon, it works great. Let me show you. To use nodemon, I'm gonna type in nodemon, just like Node, and I'm gonna pass in the file. Hit enter. You can see here, nodemon has run your code just like Node does, but it is also waiting for changes before restart. So if I do any changes on my file, like this, you can see nodemon instantly rerun my code. The combination of autosave and nodemon is very convenient. Now, you almost have everything you need. I have one more tip to you, which is navigating around the directories within your terminal. So I'm currently at my terminal. If I want to know what directory I'm at right now, I'm gonna type in WPD, which stands for present working directory, and hit enter. It's gonna give me what directory I'm in right now. From here, to go to the parent directory, you're gonna go cd and ... which is stand for change directory, and ... stand for parent directory, and hit enter. Now I'm at parent directory. To run this file, which is in lecture number 2 directory, there are 2 ways to do it. The first way that I can just be here in the directory and type in node and then the relative path to that file, which is lecture 2, and the file name. The second way to run this file is I'm gonna go to that directory and run that file from here. And this is the ideal setup to learn every day that I suggest. Make it your habit. It's very simple to do. First, you have SESV, videos and tutorial ready. Second, you have your terminal and you have your program editor ready. It's simple at that. Make it your daily habit. Now, let's talk more about input, process, and output. We mentioned it before, but we're gonna talk about it again because it's very important. So programming is having some input information, process that information, and output some useful information. IPO. IPO. It stands for input, process, output. IPO. So in real life, to achieve big things, programming usually is a collaboration between a lot of people. And if you join some part, you're gonna read and use other codes a lot. And I mean a lot. And it's very hard to understand every single line of code, which costs a lot of time. Let me give you an example why it's gonna cost a lot of time to read every single line of code. Imagine yourselves gonna join this company called Nats, and your task is to improve a functionality in this 2000 plus lines of code file. If you print this out, it's gonna be a 1 or 2 inches thick book. And your task is to change maybe 100 lines of code in this book. So where you gonna start? Let's say that your task is to improve some functionality of this process, this function. Luckily, you don't have to read the entire 2000 plus line of code to do that. All you need to do is to understand what a line of code here does. So basically, this line of code just reading for the options and manipulate the options, and then it's gonna return a new client with those options. That's all it is. If you look further up here, we even know the process, what it does, and the input, and how's the input look like. This is a very well documented piece of code. These are the inputs. These are the texts that describe what it's gonna do in the process. And this is the output. That is IPO, input, process, output. And that is how you isolate the knowledge you need to know in order to complete your task. By knowing enough instead of trying to know everything. In order to help people who join an organization to ramp up so quickly, documenting your code with IPO idea is very important. Take this code as an example. If I'm asking you to explain what this code does, it's pretty hard to do so. But it turns out, if you have some description in it, it's quite simple. This function simply calculates the output of gain and loss of the stock values. The first input is an array of stock values at buying price. The second input is an array of current value of the same stocks. When you run it, it's gonna return the current gain or loss, in this case, which is 0.5 USD. Input, process, output is a very important concept in coding. For simplicity, we're gonna coin some new terms with IPO, and we're gonna use it throughout the course. IPO is the noun, which is input, process, and output. So you can use it as what's this function IPO, meaning what does this function do and what's the output and input. IPO as verb, meaning document your code in form of input, process, output. Example usage can be, can you please IPO your code? Meaning that, can you please document your code in terms of input, process, and output? So in a nutshell, IPO help you to understand code faster, to isolate and do your task with minimal code exploration. So it's important. Always IPO when you write and read code. This is a very simple idea, but as your program gonna get complicated when it gets large, this simple idea will be very, very effective. The fourth mental note that we want to talk about is programming simply means processing information. And who's the one who's gonna do processing? It's you, not the computer. The computer is dumb and it just repeats what you tell it to do. Let me give you an example. You want to buy a gallon of milk for $5, but you mistakenly put in $500. And the computer do it anyway. It just repeat what you ask it to do. So the theme of studying throughout the course, and in fact for all the programming tasks, is that you're gonna process some raw information and get out some useful information, and you are the one who's gonna do all the processing work, and then use JavaScript language to tell the computer to repeat it. That's it for today's tutorial. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next tutorial.